Hello, everybody. My name is Ratnos, and today we have another dev interview to look at. This one is a Morgan Day, lead game designer, and he generally these are some of the better interviews that you'll find if you're interested in the same sorts of stuff I am with what's coming in each patch. So this was an interview on the Starting Zone podcast. I'll put a link to the full hour if you want here, and I'll put a link to this Wowhead article as well that has a bit of a summary. So without further ado, let's get into it. First off, talking about the new zone, Zareth Mortis, the Cypher of the first ones. Some stuff about the story here. The Cypher of the first one's very big system. That's the sort of thing that you read and you're like, drive a majority of outdoor content, okay, and will be available week 1. The goal is to incentivize exploration. Though raiders should be able to ignore the system if they want to, no raid player power will be bound to it. This sounds fantastic to me. I like the idea of a big system with a lot of stuff to do, a lot of design going into it that doesn't have raid player power bound to it, because that whenever there is some sort of system that the grind is mandatory, it's very hard for that to also be a fun grind for me when it involves going out and doing things in the outdoor world, right? Things like exploring. I'm pretty content doing that over the course of the 2 years until 10.0 on a sort of slow exploring basis. But I can't do that if there's raid power level behind it, right? I have to just blitz it in the first 3 weeks of the patch, and then hate yourself as you're running around seeing every little star on your mini map, killing the same 20 rare mobs every day. So great sounding thing here. There's a talent tree for it as well, which sort of like Tourgas Box of Anything, you can choose what to unlock, and eventually you can unlock everything. Cypher content will award currency with no weekly caps spent on that talent tree. One of the goals is to add difficulty to outdoor content, and then the talent system lets you nerf that content. So probably rare mobs and stuff out in the world, those sorts of things that are difficult to deal with, and then this Cypher will make it so that they are easily soloable. I like this kind of system as well because it means that doing those things before you're powered up will be challenging, and that's cool. New quests unlock as you advance the quest line, account-wide unlocks, similar to those seen in 9.15, thank goodness. Look into ways of adding ways to speed up content progression on alts, such as ways to earn more currency as time goes on. Fantastic as well. This is very welcome. I would say, given that there's not power bound to it, it's not even necessary, but fantastic. It'll make it so that if you can catch up and go double speed for those first few levels on your alts 3 months into the patch, I always think that's good when possible. So thinking about it in advance rather than having to do it in 9.2.5 is great. You'll be able to find gear, treasure, rares with an item level range of 229 to 249. So 249, the highest thing you can find here, is higher than Heroic Sylvanas and lower than Mythic Terragru, right? In that spot there, and will be lower than normal Sepulcher of the first ones gear. Fantastic. Great item level range here that it will be, right at or below that normal raid level. Very cool. Special set bonuses like increased mobility outside of instances. Sounds good to me. No plans for any new gold sync mounts. There will be 2 forges for collectors. The Synthesis Forge, where you'll collect automa and construct pieces and combine them to make pets and mounts, protoform synthesis, all using resources collected in Zareth Mortis. Very cool. Raid design. They always try to not repeat mistakes from one raid to another, using Tomb of Sargeras, an example of failure in raid design they don't want to repeat. Oh, Tomb of Soapgeras. Okay. Yeah, so that was after Tomb of Sargeras, they stopped making as many mechanics that you could feint and stand in and bring 5 rogues and trivialize. They feel like in Sanctum, raid teams are strategizing too much around the availability of raid cooldowns or having to hold cooldowns, and that falls on the same level of design failure as soaking was in Tomb. I think this is a good diagnosis of one of the big problems in Sanctum. Stopping damage, holding cooldowns, and having the strategy really built around cooldowns. Although, to me, the fact of that maybe less to do with the raid than the amount of power that has been concentrated into our cooldowns. which has been further enhanced by the fact that our Covenant abilities are multiplicative with our cooldowns in a lot of cases, and a lot of our soul binds trigger when we use our Conduit abilities or our Covenant abilities, and so there's just all this power is in the burst for a lot of specs. But I like the idea that they're trying to make fights where that will not be as much of a thing. Soul Render Dormazane, a good example of a fight that accomplishes that by just not having phase-based timers, although that's obviously you want to have a lot of fights that have phases because those are cool, and thinking about how to make it so that we don't AFK at the end of one phase until just before a dangerous ability so that we can start the next phase with our cooldowns as available as possible is definitely something I think it's good to do in advance. Regarding the length of Sylvanas' encounter, they wanted to tell a story. Given Sylvanas' history with WoW as a whole, they had a lot they wanted to get across. They knew it would be a long fight. They felt like it would be a good opportunity to do that on Sylvanas. No fights in the Sepulchre should last that long. I don't think there's anything inherently bad with fights that are long. I just think that fights that have a boring phase in the middle of them are bad. So that, which is compounded when it is a really long fight as well. But yeah, I think the end boss length of 8 to 12 minutes has been really good when they've landed there. Sylv going a little bit over that. Although, the thing is, from minute 9 of Sylvanas till the end of the fight, it is the best part of the fight. So it doesn't even really feel like it drags on there. It's really just that phase 2. There is a flight network within the Sepulchre. That's the raid. And the raid is competition for being the biggest raid size-wise in WoW history. They want to convey the grandiose of raiding the place where entire afterlives are created. Flight networks are unlocked as you defeat bosses, and they will reset when the raid is reset, but shortcuts are being planned. Sounds good to me. I mean, I think traveling between the raid after you've killed bosses is one thing. I think shortcuts are definitely an important thing too, so hopefully those make it as well, which is like once you've been clearing the raid for a month, not having to do bosses 3 through 7 is always really nice when possible, or in particular being able to skip some of the worst trash of a raid many months in, always really nice whenever that's possible. On boss time gating, the Anduin encounter itself could be the end boss of every other raid in WoW, and the encounter is supposed to be super epic. They want the time gating to serve as a breather for history reasons, and they also feel the majority of the player base won't be affected by the time gating. They want to use this opportunity to try something special with storytelling. Lots to break apart in this bullet point. First thing, I like the idea of the Anduin encounter being very cool. I do think it's the fact that there's 3 more bosses after Anduin. If the next 2 are a lot easier than Anduin, that could maybe lead to a letdown, sort of. Painsmith, right, was a boss that could have been the end boss of many other raids in WoW's history. But then the fact that it was followed by weaker bosses, right, much easier boss fights, was a little bit weird. It's always a little bit weird when there's a big dip in the difficulty of the raid. So I don't know. I think hopefully it's fine. I think if Anduin is harder than the next 2, I just think it shouldn't be by that much. Then the thing they're doing with time gating, which is Heroic Week, the 3 bosses after Anduin aren't available on any difficulty, and then Mythic Week, those 3 will open up. I think that's cool, but I don't like the logic being used here, which is, we want the time gate to serve as we want the time gate to do stuff, and we also feel like people won't be affected by it. I feel like if you think it's going to be cool and good, the argument shouldn't be we don't think people will be affected by this. And I feel like they make this argument a lot, and oftentimes it's for stuff that I feel like is bad, so I want to call it out here where it's something I feel like it's good, as which is this case, right? I feel like the time gating, the argument is that the players it affects will be positively affected by it, and that, whenever your argument is we don't think this is going to affect a lot of people, that usually is something you're using to justify the people it does affect being negatively affected, right? But I think here it's going to be cool to have those last 3 fights be sequestered behind the Mythic Week rather than Heroic Week. Still being discussed, there are plans to not test the final bosses at all on the PTR. That's when they say final bosses here, do they mean Anduin? Do they mean the 3 after Anduin? If they want Anduin to be the end boss, a super epic encounter, that would be argument to not test Anduin. If they want it to be, preserving the mystery of the 3 that are time gated, maybe it's those 3. I'm very curious to see how this lands, because obviously the idea of not PTR testing bosses is really cool from the perspective of, getting to see the bosses, having the bosses be a surprise, be a mystery. The Race to World First would be hugely enhanced by that. But also just, I think everybody on Heroic Week, on Mythic Week would be pretty hyped as they individually experience these bosses, that there isn't all this pre-built knowledge about how they work or how they look or what the mechanics even look like. So I love that in theory. In practice, I think it is important that they make sure they only bite off as much as they can chew with buggy encounters. I think that a little bit of bugginess for the Race to World First is fine if it comes with big advantages for Race to World First, but if they are having bugginess trickle down to difficulties below Mythic, and if there's or if there's just sizable bugginess, I think that would be a drawback, making that would outweigh the benefits of those cool factors about this that I mentioned. So yeah, hopefully they land well. I mean, I think the best thing for the raids would be if there didn't need to be PTR testing at all. But if PTR testing is necessary, it's much better they do it than they don't. They want to focus on delivering a quality raid with no bugs. No bugs. So a lot of ongoing discussion on making that happen. If they deliver a raid with no bugs, that would be a miracle. I don't think that has ever happened, and I don't think it should be expected to either. But no major bugs would be sweet. Gear, tier sets, and legendaries. There will be a new rank of legendaries. It'll require the Cosmic Flux, which is the Echoes of Nyalotha inspired currency, obtainable from nearly every endgame activity. Previous legendary ranks will still require the older materials, presumably at the rate. There's no new further buffs to it, but if you're crafting legendary in 915, it's very fast to get those materials now. So you just run a couple Tourgas, and running those Tourgas will get you your Cosmic Flux as well. So you still need Tourgas to get those resources. Although you can scrap your legendaries, right, and get back so you can scrap a different legendary and get back those resources. Cosmic Flux will be used alongside Creation Catalyst to create tier set pieces from other activities, such as Mythic Plus or Raid. And when you upgrade an item, the tier sets, they'll have static stats, so you don't need to fish for items with perfect secondaries to transform into tier. I'd been wondering about how this would function myself, and I guess I'm happy with this. It's nice to not have to go and get the right stats and then imbue them with tier. On the other hand, that is a little bit of a nerf in terms of how powerful we will be at the end of the expansion. I was like being really powerful at the end of the expansion, but I think that the benefits of this outweigh doing it the other way, which is, the item preserving its stats and gaining the benefit. I think that would have some nasty implications for, needing to, the difference between getting that perfect item out of your Great Vault or not finding it at the high item level would be kind of annoying. So yeah, here you'll just, you can find basically any armor piece and turn it into a tier set from that slot at that item level. Tertiaries are not planned, as they don't want a repeat of Benthic gear. Now, tertiaries weren't what made Benthic gear the disaster that was happening on Benthic gear. It was sockets more than tertiaries were the annoying part on Benthic, although tertiaries were definitely part of the problem there, but pretty small part. But anytime they say they're thinking about Benthic gear when they're designing their system and they're going to try and make it not look like that, I'm a fan of that. And I think, not having tertiary on tier sounds good to me. That seems like it would be a little bit of that's one less wheel spinning on the slot machine. Means that we'll have our best gear sooner. Tier pieces and bonuses will be the same no matter where you get them from, whether it's dropped from raid or crafted. Tier bonuses will work on all zones, no domination shard-like limitation. Much like with Benthic gear, anytime you're telling me this system functions differently than domination shards in this way, I'll be like, that is your new system is good. However it is different from domination shards, it is good. Domination shards were thought of as a way to give exclusive bonuses to the raid. They recognize they failed on that regard. They still want to give raiders some sort of early advantage, hence why tier set gear will initially be from the raid only, with the Creation Catalyst coming later. Yeah, I think the way they have structured this, depending on when the Creation Catalyst comes out, I think it's important that it's not too much later, but I think there's a range anywhere from 3 weeks into the patch to 2 months into the patch is probably a place I'd be fine with landing the Catalyst. I'd probably advocate for sooner rather than later in that range, but I think anywhere in that space is probably fine. I doubt they would go as late as 2 months anyway. They want set bonuses to serve as a path to catch up to other players. As far as unique loot goes, like the Kel'Thuzad Sword or Sylvanas Dagger, there will be a thing in Sepulchre, but it won't be a big part of your player power. It should just serve as a fun side bonus. So they don't want the difference between a player who finds Edge of Night, a player who finds Jaethus, a player who can Mythic Raid and has access to Jaethus to be as big as it was this tier. I think that's good as well. I think it's normal that raiders are going to have the best gear. If you want your character to be in best in slot gear, you have to be willing to not just raid, but also Mythic Plus and PvP, right? Best in slot gear sets almost always include all three, but usually with the couple of specs being the exception, like badge for specs that use badge and some Mythic Plus trinkets, usually it's true that even if your best in slot is technically from raid or from PvP or Mythic Plus, the raid second best option is like a 0.2% DPS loss, right? But the difference between Jaethus and the best sword you could get, not even counting just the end of dungeon run, but say you even got a good sword out of your Great Vault, right? 252 sword there, it's still a huge difference. And if you couldn't get one out of your Great Vault, right, and you were using a 246 end of dungeon Valor upgraded piece, it was a huge DPS decrease. So I like the idea of narrowing that gap. I don't expect it to go away entirely, but I applaud narrowing it. I do think it's nice to have cool, compelling items that are drops from raid, though. As much as that's the downside of having items like Jaethus and Edge of Night, they are items where it's like, they are compelling items that have a story built around them, right? That their names, their power, and I think it's cool when there are items that land in that spot and they're not all just kind of nameless stat sticks, right? Personal loot in Great Vault. They recognize personal loot has problems for both guild groups and casual pugs. It would be something to be addressed between expansions, not a patch. They like how the Great Vault is expanded on the system. Should feel like Christmas every reset. Rerolling items in the vault has been brought up in discussions. No plans on that yet. Tier set can drop from the vault. Requirements for Great Vault chests are not being changed. Raid loot will still be limited by what bosses you kill. I do kind of wish that this is always the part that feels clunky to me, because there are incentives to not add certain bosses to your vault. For instance, there are some people in my raid that, especially on their second characters, they're like, I need to never be in for this specific boss because I do not want it polluting my Great Vault's drop pool. And progression, that's not really an issue because that concern does not outweigh the other concerns when you're deciding which characters are in for which bosses. But it is an annoying little side effect of doing the Great Vault this way. Maybe it's better than having it the other way. I'm not sure. Conduits. They heard a lot of community feedback on conduit acquisition, how much effort it takes to upgrade them, how you can't target specific conduits, so they've added steps to address some of the problems. Haven't decided how to properly address others. They're discussing if a conduit upgrade, like the items from Korthia, will be in the patch or not, but there will be new conduit levels. Has to double check, believes only one more rank for conduits. So one more rank for conduits, one more rank for legendaries are what they're suggesting right now, rather than the 2 that we got in patch 9.1. Unsure if there will be a minimum conduit item level floor for catch-up purposes. Acknowledged it's a good idea. Yeah, the conduit item level floor, I mean, we kind of have that at, 226 right now. That's the level you can upgrade with Soul Twinning Crescents. Maybe they could bump that up to 252, right? And then the next level, 265, presumably, is the ceiling. I don't know. I think the main issue I have with conduits is that depending on which conduit it is, it's much easier or harder to find it, right? Like, if your Abyss conduit drops from the second boss in the raid, right? Versus if it drops from M+, or PvP, or, there's no source for it and you just have to upgrade it with the items. Those are very different life experiences. So to me, that's the big issue with them. Tourgas Upgrades. Tourgas will receive new content, floors, and creature types, along with a new wing, the Jailer's Gauntlet. Cosmetic rewards only. I hope that they give it cosmetic rewards and it still gives cinders and ash and stuff for if you don't need that, and the cosmic flux or whatever. Less traditional open floors, more of a boss rush kind of scenario. Oh, this is talking about the Jailer's Gauntlet. Okay. Yeah. So hopefully the new floors give more cinders and ash than the current ones, and enough Cosmic Flux to actually make it a reasonable use of your time. But the Jailer's Gauntlet is a boss rush, slam bosses back to back to back. That actually sounds pretty cool. That maybe sounds like what would have been more fun the whole time. No new upgrades for the Box of Many Things. Tazavesh. They felt like Operation Mechagon was in a good spot when it was added to Mythic Plus. They want to try a similar approach with Tazavesh. Should be testable early on PTR. Hard mode is not planned to be added to M+. So to be expected with the Tazavesh. This is what we all projected would happen in 9.2 with Tazavesh, upper Tazavesh and lower Tazavesh becoming M+ dungeons. I do wish that hard mode and M+ could coexist. I feel like the hard mode mechanics in a lot of the fights are really cool. And it's always kind of a shame that, like a lot of the fun parts of Karazhan, doing the Nightbane run, they disappear once it gets added to M+. The hard mode, especially hard mode Deathless, but the hard mode runs of Mechagon, a lot of that cool stuff doesn't get used in the M+ version. And similarly with Tazavesh, I do think it's a bit of a shame. I kind of wish that there was a way to have the hard mode be like the default for the M+, and then have it be balanced numbers-wise around that. Or my kind of long-term wish would be, instead of Tyrannical, just have Tyrannical be hard mode bosses instead, and obviously have it balanced around that being a reasonable difficulty increase. But, that's obviously a big undertaking and not something to expect in this patch. Given that, I'm reasonably happy with this. I'm looking forward to Tazavesh just because I would like a new dungeon. Adding two dungeons here, that's 25% more dungeons for Shadowlands, which is an unfortunate ratio for 2 dungeons to be adding to an expansion. But it is what it is, and it should freshen up the M+ experience. Anyways, this interview is fantastic. There's a huge amount of great news here. A lot of stuff that is really encouraging and designed to give us just the right amount of hope, even as we've been battered by all these systems of 9.1 and 9.0. Just enough hope so that then when they eventually, it all is actually bad, it just crushes us all the more. Anyways, hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one. Bye.